So, proper introduction. My name is Hannah, and I work at the McLean County Museum of History. Has anyone visited the History Museum in downtown Bloomington before? I see a couple of hands. It's in a giant stone building with a big old dome at the top. Okay, excellent. Well, you've seen it, right? Maybe seen pictures. Well, hopefully someday you can come visit us. We are back open. We are so excited to have people in our building. But I got the invitation today to talk with you all about Juneteenth. Now, what I want us to do is raise our hand again if we have ever heard this word, Juneteenth. All right. Those of us who have heard the word, what do we know about it? What is Juneteenth?
It's like, I think it's like,
In museums? Okay. It definitely has to do with history. Yeah.
It's about how slavery was ended.
Okay, excellent. The ending of slavery. So this date here, June 19th, 1865, is the date. Dylan, you want to advance our slide for me? Perfect. The anniversary of the announcement, the General Order Number 3 by Union Army General Gordon Granger, proclaiming freedom from slavery in Texas. Okay, now who has heard of the Civil War in the United States? All right, what do we know about the Civil War? Dylan.
Lots of people fought it.
Yes, lots of people fought it. Who were those people? Or what else do you know about the Civil War? That's okay. Yeah. Yes. Yep, for sure. Yeah. Fought for a long time, right? Years they fought this war. 1861 to 1865. Yeah.
It was between the Sunday and the morning.
Okay, right? So the North and the South fighting, right? A civil war means a war that's happening within a country or within a community. Okay, so we had the northern states versus the southern states. There were lots of issues going on, but the South wanted to be independent. They wanted to be their own nation, right? So we've heard words like union and confederacy, okay? So when we think about the Southern Confederacy in the United States at that time, we oftentimes think about slavery. When I say the word slavery, what are we talking about? Yeah.
Take your hands down so you can hear you guys. When, people as slaves so they would work for them so they wouldn't have to work.
Okay, excellent, right? When we say slavery, we are talking about people owning other people as property, oftentimes putting those people to work, right? So in the South, they were working plantations for cotton and tobacco, right? Doing the jobs of other people for no pay. They had no choice in the matter, right? They were forced to work, they were forced to live in a particular place, and that's all they had the choice to do. Yeah.
She brought some of her family and some other people that were working for and there was this one place where it got too big, so they had to go back.
Yeah. Yeah, so Harriet Tubman, a huge person to remember from this time period. The Underground Railroad, right, was a pathway for people to get freedom, right, before slavery had been officially ended. We've got one more hand up.
But the slave was like completely property to the land, and it was like they could do
Okay, exactly right. Now what's your name, bud? Say it one more time. Caden. Okay, Caden made an excellent point, and I'm so glad that you did, right? Because when we talk about slavery, there can be lots of different versions of slavery, right? But when we are talking about American slavery during the Civil War, mentioned, right, white men predominantly owning African American people. So Dylan, go ahead and advance that for me. Okay, so we can't quite see it on the, but that's okay. September 22nd, 1862 is an important date for us to remember. This is when Abraham Lincoln first announced the Emancipation Proclamation that would go into effect January 1 of 1863. And in this proclamation, it was stated that all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, right, shall be then thenceforward and forever free. So when we hear the word Emancipation Proclamation, we oftentimes think of the end of slavery. And this is the document that really put that ending in motion, okay? December 18th, 1865, however, is the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States. All right? So slavery, we think about the ending, kind of the start of the end. The beginning of the end was the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862 into 1863. We are talking about June 19, 1865, which is before the 13th Amendment, which officially ended. So it's like we see this journey happening, and why June 19th is so important is because it was that day, right, that those folks in Galveston, Texas, those enslaved persons first heard word about this. Years later, right, over 2 years later, they were finally told that, by the way, slavery is over. And that means it's over for you right now. So they were some of the last people to learn about this huge event. And so we can understand why June 19th, 1865 and June 19th every year since then has been such an important date for Black Americans in Texas. And it's continued to grow as a holiday since. And now we have the entire country, right, celebrating this really important day in our history.
Well, even after the Emancipation Proclamation, some slave masters they went to other states that didn't hear about it, and they took slaves with them secretly, so they could still
No, you're exactly right. It wasn't just this sudden end, right? It took time. And different states ended slavery at different times. And we're talking about a practice or, an institution that was 400 some years in the making. White people had owned Black people in this country for a long, long time. So it took a little while, right, to stop that practice. Yeah.
When Abraham Lincoln got elected, he said that he was the reason why slavery started, because of the fact that he was slaves in some countries. He let not all countries, I mean all states.
All states.
Not free to slavery, a little bit of slave for slavery. So that was just slavery. And instead of when we were slaves, when living in Canada, they would go to Canada to choose free for slavery. Or if slave catchers went anywhere and they saw a Black person, they were able just to take him to slave owners and they would have to work for.
Yeah, no. So again, the difference between the states and the Civil War period is a fascinating time if you're interested in history to learn all about. Illinois, as an example, right, was always a free state in the Union, okay, which meant that we never had slavery as approved in our state. But it didn't mean, right, that we were totally open to everybody and that racism and prejudice and segregation didn't exist. Those things existed here too. They just took different forms than what we kind of think about when we think about slavery in the southern United States. All right? So I see some hands, but let's go ahead, Dylan. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Okay? So these are important words to consider. All right? So Juneteenth is kind of this clever combination between June and 19th, right? It's Juneteenth. But Juneteenth is also known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Emancipation Day, and Liberation Day. What we're going to do is we're going to circle back to these words, but I want you to consider these words as we move into the next part of our conversation. Go ahead, Dylan. Yeah. Jubilee is like jubilant. It's celebratory. It's happy. Yeah, that one's sometimes a tough one. All right, I want to introduce you to the Duff family. And why I want to introduce you to the Duff family, which includes Peter Duff, his wife Fannie Walker Duff, and their children, John Walker, Alberta, George, Julia, Raleigh, and Jamie, okay? The Duff family was a local family, moved into the area, into Normal, Illinois specifically, in the 1870s. Now, Peter Duff and his wife, who didn't know each other at the time, of course, but they were both born into slavery. And they were born into slavery in the southern states, eventually moved to Illinois, had a family, okay? But we can consider, so Fannie was born in 1865, the very year that we were just talking about, right? The day, June 19th, 1865. Peter was born a few years earlier, so he experienced slavery a little bit more than his wife Fannie did. But this is how close that history is to us. So let's go ahead and move forward. Okay, so Peter Duff moved to Normal in 1870 with his brother. Peter Duff became a close acquaintance of Jessie Fell, who, if you know Fell Park, or if you know Fell Street, or Fell Avenue, or you know Fort Jessie, right, whether the cafe or the road, all of those relate to Jessie Fell, who was the founder of the town of Normal, helped get ISU started here, all right? So Jessie Fell was very open and welcoming to African and Black Americans moving into the area. And so when Peter came, he became acquaintances with Jessie Fell. He got work through Jessie Fell. And through that connection, he was able to purchase land from Jessie Fell to build his very own home, which still stands today. So if you're ever on the trail just north of Uptown Normal, there's Poplar Street. So 107 North Poplar Street, West Poplar Street, was the residence of the Duff family. Peter built this house himself. What's cool, if you visit us at the museum, we have some pieces, parts, some old cabinets and things on display that was from this original home. Go ahead, Dylan. All right. Now, the Duff sons, okay? So we mentioned Walker, we mentioned George, we mentioned Raleigh. All of these boys and into men were great athletes. They played football and basketball, and a couple of them made careers managing athletic clubs and that sort of thing, okay? I want us to consider, had slavery not ended, right? Had Fannie and Peter not be able to have left the South, right? The lives of their sons, the lives of their daughters would have been very different. Go ahead to the next slide, Dawn. All right, and we talk about how history overlaps. So we've got Alberta and Julia Duff, some of the Duff daughters, okay? Alberta Duff worked for the Stevenson family. So Adlai Stevenson II was governor of Illinois. He worked for the United Nations. He was involved in big historic events like the Cuban Missile Crisis. All right, Alberta was there seeing that, working with the family. Julia studied in school and went out to teach in Kansas and Oklahoma. She was in Tulsa being visited by her sister, Alberta. when the Tulsa massacre happened. Have we heard any talk about the Tulsa race massacre at all? Yeah, raise your hand if that sounds familiar to you. So this year, 2021, is an important year because it's the 100th anniversary of this really horrible event that happened in Tulsa, but Julia and Alberta happened to see it in person. So in May 31st of 1921, so again 100 years ago, a mob came through a black neighborhood called Greenwood and rioted and burned down buildings and killed people. And it was this horrible event that took 3 days. And we're still learning so much of the history that happened that day. But the idea that we can be here together talking about Juneteenth, right, talking about these local people who were born into slavery, but came to this area and made a life for themselves and made a family, and then to think about all the historic events that their children witnessed and experienced and were a part of, right? It kind of makes it helps us put into perspective what would have happened, hypothetically, if Fanny and Peter had been born into slavery and stayed in slavery, right? Think of all of the things that may or may not have happened afterwards. Yeah.
The real interesting.
Yeah, Alberta.
I think that's where it means Stevenson School.
Yes, exactly right. So if we know Stevenson School, if we know Stevenson Hall at Illinois State University, lots of things in town is named after the Stevenson family. You're exactly right. We like to lay claim to Adlai Stevenson. All right, Dylan, you're up. Okay, so circling back to these words, right? I want to hear from you. What does freedom mean? What does liberation mean? Right, Dylan?
Freedom means being free and out of stuff that might make you have to work for someone.
Okay, right? So not having to work for somebody else, being free. Yeah, Kaden. Having rights. Exactly right. What kind of rights?
Rights to walk around. Well, like walk around. Like back then, they had rights to walk around without being
Yeah, right? I mean, the right to live, the right to be in a community, in a neighborhood, right? To walk down the street, to go to the store, to use their restroom, right? What else?
the right to vote.
The right to vote, right? That is a very important right that a lot of people have worked very hard, right, to earn that right in this country. What else? Freedom, emancipation, liberation. What does it mean to you?
They also have the right to get a new job, or a job.
Yes.
Without having to do all the extra that other people did.
Yeah, the right to work, right? The right to make a living. Exactly right. And to be working for yourself, to be working for your family. Yeah.
The right to have whatever job you want.
Whatever job you want. Exactly right. Not to be told, right, that this is the job that you have to do whether you like it or not. We have the freedom, right, to choose to do things that make us happy, right? That to make ourselves smarter and stronger and whatever else we want to work towards. Did you have an idea? Yeah.
The right to live.
The right to live. Exactly right. Just to exist, to be, and to be the best person that you can be. Yeah.
Like, back when slavery was, slavery was happening, back when if they wanted to marry each other, or like date, they would have to have permission for the masters. And so, they date somebody without permission.
Yeah. So how about the right to fall in love, right? The right to date. The right to hang out with whoever you want to hang out with. The right to be friends, or the freedom to be friends. Yeah.
Some of my friends I know, or people I know, or even some of my family, they're black and white. Because one day I learned that people, even though they're different skin codes, they can be married.
Yeah, exactly right, because people are people, right? At the end of the day, we're into the same stuff. We like to hang out. We like to watch Netflix. We like to eat food, right? We like to go to the park. Okay, yeah.
And one other thing,
Yeah.
because my mom and her sister, Cammy, my aunt, because they have different dads, they're also different colored skins.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, mixed families, right? All kinds of things. We all have our own personal story, and hopefully we feel, at least most days, right, that we have the freedom to live that life, right? Whatever that life might be. All right, so Dylan, go ahead and advance for me one more time. All right, and this is just a reminder that sometimes it's hard for us to be able to define these really good words, right, without knowing some of the bad, right? But we talked about slavery, we talked about racism, we talked about prejudice. They kind of go hand in hand, but we can work against these things, right, and towards these things for everybody. So Dylan, give me the next slide. Excellent. All right, so I just want to kind of wrap up today. We talked about the history of Juneteenth and how it came about, but there's also a history of how we've celebrated Juneteenth here locally. So going back to Texas, right, the holiday came around as an official holiday in the state of Texas in 1980. We have been celebrating Juneteenth here locally since about 1993. The Bloomington Normal Black History Project, which is an affiliate organization of the McLean County Museum of History, started those celebrations and has continued them, which is part of the reason why I'm here today, is because all of the work of the folks involved in the Bloomington Normal Black History Project, all of the work they've done to promote Juneteenth, to get the entire community involved. And we're really excited to say that as of last year, Juneteenth is an official holiday for the city of Bloomington, which means city staff get the day off, which means the city of Bloomington is supporting these programs and these opportunities to celebrate and remember this history and celebrate this freedom for everybody. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me. All right, Bloomington Normal Black History Project, just mentioned them. And then we'll end with one more note. Dylan, go ahead and go forward. All right, so sometimes you might see this flag. Juneteenth has an official flag. So this was designed in the 80s or the 90s. What do we see in this flag? Dylan, what do you see?
The same colors as the United States of America flag.
Same colors as the United States of America, which was very intentional, right? It is a great reminder that red, white, and blue means that we are all Americans, right? That the enslaved persons that were freed back in 1865 were Americans then, just as we're all Americans today. So that red, white, and blue are still very important colors. What else do we notice in this flag? Yeah.
It has a star.
It has a star.
Yeah, but the United States has more stars because of the more states.
Okay, exactly right. So we have 50 stars for 50 states on the U.S. flag, right? The Juneteenth flag has 1 star. Now, Texas is sometimes known as the Lone Star State. So that 1 star reminds us that this important day happened, right, in Galveston, Texas. But it also makes us remember that it's not just Texans we're talking about, right? It's Black and African Americans throughout the country who can all be unified with this flag and in celebration of Juneteenth. Anything else we notice?
Like there's like the star. You see the star? There's like also a big thing.
Yeah, exactly right. Kind of a starburst, we'll say. Okay, and so that's
a sun.
it. Kind of does look like a sun.
All stars, or it does look like a sun seesaw.
Yeah, a little bit. And what does the sun do? It radiates light, right? So our starburst is radiating out. So again, to note that this was an important day in history, but it's continuing to go out. Celebration is involving everybody, the whole community. And then the other thing I'll point out is this horizon line. Okay, so we're looking to the horizon, we're looking to the future. So even as we acknowledge the past, right, and celebrate this history, we know that there is work to be done, and we are moving towards that new horizon together. Yeah. And it's also still inside of the star. Exactly right. So they all kind of lead together. All right. Well, that was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, friends.